This is the Classic Guitar Rock Daily Update.
We'd like to say that, in our opinion, it is not suitable for children or for those of you who may have a nervous disposition.
Exclusively on ESPN Plus, UFC 313, Saturday. Reigning light heavyweight champion Alex Pereira defends his title against #1 contender Magomed Ankalaev, and an explosive lightweight bout between Justin Gaethje and Rafael Pazzi. UFC 313, Saturday at 10 p.m. Eastern. Buy it on ESPNplus.com/PPV.
Spanning the globe to bring you the latest in classic rock news and comment. It's the Classic Guitar Rock Daily Update with your host, Jeremy Lunnan.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining us from wherever you're joining us. I appreciate it. Could you do me a colossal favor? If you enjoy these updates or the podcast, and you've got like-minded friends or acquaintances that might enjoy it, share it with them. Send them an email that says, hey, I listen to this every day. You might enjoy it. That would be wonderful if you could do that. It's word of mouth, right? Word of mouth. That's the secret. So let's hop in here. I like stories of redemption. Is redemption the right word? I like stories of healing. And I don't mean to get all cosmic, but some of you may or may not be aware that way back in the 80s, Vince Neil of Motley Crue was in a drunk driving accident. He was driving, and with him in the vehicle were 3 other people. 2 were severely injured. 1 was killed. And the drummer of the band Hanoi Rocks, his name was Razzle Dingley, was killed. Vince wound up serving some prison time and ultimately paid a fine of $2.6 million for vehicular manslaughter. Now, as you can imagine, this has weighed heavily on Vince. I mean, you can only imagine, right? The lead singer of Hanoi Rocks, Michael Monroe, shared a story about how he and Vince were able to get together last year and talk about it. They met last June. And this was all kind of put together through the help of Nikki Sixx and Joe Elliott, right? They were kind of the go-betweens. Joe Elliott knew both bands. He knew Nikki. He reached out to Nikki and said, hey, Michael would like to get together with Vince. And as you can imagine, if you're Vince Neil, that was probably kind of an emotional thing, right? He had never met Michael in person. And so this was just kind of a tragic thing that they both shared. Obviously, Razzle had been Michael's drummer, and Vince was the one, sadly, who was driving when he was killed. So think about the feelings that might be associated with that. Michael contacted Elliott, who he described as a sweetheart and an angel, asking him to pass on a message to Nikki Sixx. As a result, a meeting was arranged at the Rockfest event in Finland, where Crue was playing. So when he reached out to Nikki, he said, Nikki responded right away in an email. And they ultimately wind up meeting, and he first met them very quick off stage. And he said if he'd arrived earlier, Monroe had aimed to join Crue on stage for a rendition of Smokin' in the Boys' Room, because Michael's a harmonica player. He said, I just play the harmonica solo. But they didn't get a chance to do that. But they did get a chance to meet as soon as the show was over. And Mike Monroe says that he and Vince met face to face for the first time. I just told him that Razzle always wanted us to meet because us singers were all alike. and he smiled. And then we looked at each other in the eyes for about half a minute or something. I could just see how much pain he's been living with. But then he felt, after the meeting, they talked for a few minutes, but after the meeting, he sent a letter. He wrote a letter to Vince, and Vince received this letter. It's, quote, "I'm sure he's sick and tired of being tormented by the whole thing, and he should forgive himself and live a happy life." That's what Razzle would want for him. He's a good person. He deserves happiness in his life. He's had a really rough time, and he's never been the same after that. It's a horrible thing to happen, and it could have happened to any of us. He added, "I was glad to be able to do that. Reach out to him, and next time they come to Finland or wherever we are, if we're in the same place, I'll be up there playing the harp on Smokin' in the Boys' Room." So I'm glad that happened, right? I'm glad that happened for Vince, and I can only imagine what that would be like. So that's a story I'm glad we could talk about today. The Doobie Brothers are in the final stages of completing a new album with Michael McDonald. Michael McDonald is a transformative figure in the history of the Doobie Brothers. Some were not as happy when Michael came in to the Doobie Brothers. It totally changed their sound, but it did give them some of the biggest success. What a Fool Believes, right? The Minute by Minute album. So they were very successful with Michael, but it did, in fact, change the chemistry of the band quite a bit. By the way, there's a great interview with Michael McDonald on the Rick Beato channel on YouTube. I would encourage you to watch that. Pat Simmons of the Doobie Brothers put up an update on social media yesterday. He says, quote, "We are very close to finishing up an album's worth of new songs. We're lucky once again to have John Shanks producing and Michael McDonald joining with us on this one. Tom Johnston, Michael, John, and myself have composed a great bunch of songs that we're really proud of, and John McPhee is really a standout on the tracks. It's the first time in 40 years that Michael has recorded a whole album with the band, and in my humble opinion, it's turning out to be some of the best music we've ever made together." So that's good news. Doobie Brothers, I did not see them. A friend of mine saw them about 10 years ago, maybe, up in my neck of the woods. He said they were awesome. It's a great show. They had some great songs, great catalog and great songs. So that's good news. Marlon is checking in. Marlon Hill, thank you, sir. Thanks for tuning in today. Appreciate it. And he quotes, "You don't know me, but I'm your brother." Of course, from What a Fool Believes. One of my favorite songs, actually. It's just a great tune. We got news about the Priest. Now, we're 2 days away from Invincible Shield dropping. And we'll be talking about that. So that's Friday, right? I'm 2 days away from the new Priest album, and every indication is it's going to be a really good album. Well, we've got some news about Priest, specifically about former Priest member and band leader of KK's Priest, one Kenneth KK Downing. In a new interview with Greg Prato of AllMusic, Judas Priest bassist Ian Hill was asked if he's still in touch with former Priest guitarist Kenneth KK Downing and whether he would ever consider working with KK again. Ian responded, quote, "I think he's gone a bit too far for that now. I gave him a couple of chances to basically say hello and he blanked me. So he ain't going to get another chance. It's a pity the way it's turned out, but things are what they are." So Ian doesn't really sound like he is on board with a reunion with KK. But last year they played, or was it the year before? It was either last year or the year before. Priest was inducted and KK came and played with them for the induction. And that sounded like a great thing, that it went really well. In fact, Ian said the whole thing was magical. It was way different to what I thought it was going to be. I didn't know it was going to be such a large event. For start, it was loads of people. You're paying public, if you know what I mean, not just the stars and the celebrities down at the tables in the front there. That was a real big surprise, the actual scale of it all. It was a joy to do at the end of the day, he continued. It was great to see Ken again. I hope he feels the same. It was very, very quick. We saw him for an hour or so on rehearsal day, 2 days before the induction, and then another hour or so on the show day. And then everybody went their separate ways, but it was nice to see Ken. And he talks about, a little further on that of seeing KK and Les. They brought Les Binks in. Les Binks played on, I think he played on Stained Class and Hellbent for Leather. I think those are the only two Les Binks albums. He's a great drummer. He was one of the originators of the double bass drumming that got so popular, right? Not just playing a double bass kit, right? Because lots of guys had played double bass kits before then, but the style of that's completely overused now, but he was one of the originators of that style, by the way. Anyways, Ian talks a little bit about, when they first saw each other at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He says, quote, "I went over and said hello to Ken, said hello to Les. That's about as far as it went, really. So did Rob. Glenn, he was rather frail on the day, so he just sort of sat on the sidelines until he had to do his thing. And of course, Richie Faulkner, who's the current guitarist in Priest, Richie's gregarious. He was on the same side of the stage anyway, so he was talking to Ken a lot. But yeah, it was all very professional. It was all well done. At the end of the day, we put on a great performance and we all got the gong, which was great news. Okay. And it is, if you watch the performance at the hall, it was great. I have often thought it would be cool if they bring back KK. So then we got two blonde guitarists playing Flying V's. Okay. And then how would this be? You bring Michael Schenker on board, another blonde. I don't know if he's got much hair left. He always wears that big Russian Cossack hat. But if his hair's still blonde, you could have three blonde-haired guitarists playing Flying V's. How cool would that be? Sign me up for that. Let's talk about Van Halen really quick. Specifically, Wolfgang is responding to some comments that David Lee Roth made about a month ago that were just kind of weird, kind of disparaging about Wolfie. And Wolfie didn't do anything. I mean, he doesn't deserve that. But he said some pretty negative things about Wolfgang. And Wolfgang, everything I've seen about Wolfgang, he's pretty level-headed guy. Okay, he doesn't get emotional. He just kind of takes things in stride. He says, quote, "I guess I'm honored he even thinks about me as much as he seems to. I guess you have to take what he says with a grain of salt, considering he also said that he wrote Eddie Van Halen's classic instrumental Eruption." That's what Dave claims. And that he came up with the Frankenstein guitar, the famous guitar that Eddie used. He said he wrote all the solos that Dad wrote. So this is fascinating. I guess that's all I can say. I seem to have been born into this Van Halen drama that has come way before me. And I guess now that my dad isn't here to be a target, I guess he went to the next best thing. He continues, quote, "It's one thing when there's some dude on Twitter being a jerk, saying a lie about me. But when there's other people trying to lie about me and make me look bad, it's just like you can believe whatever you want, I guess. The people who hate me are going to continue to hate me, and I'm just going to be over here doing my thing." So what's a feller to do? Okay. I've got one last item. Oh yes, this is exciting. I'm excited about this. Iron Maiden bassist Steve Harris has expressed interest in writing an autobiography. Yeah, he founded Maiden in 1975, and he's the primary. Can I say he's the band leader? He kind of is the band leader. We always tend to think that lead singers are usually, but that's very often not the case. Steve Harris, the primary lyricist, and obviously the songwriting is a collaboration, but I think he actually writes on guitar or bass and has an idea, and then obviously gets together with Dave and Adrian and Lars. What's the other guitar player? Lars, the other guy, the other the one that dances all the time. They get together and they hash out these songs, but it's really Steve Harris who writes the lyrics, and he's a phenomenal lyricist. Guys, I can't tell you how much I've learned about history because of Iron Maiden, right? You listen to a song like Where Eagles Dare, or Alexander the Great, or even drawing on things from literature like Rime of the Ancient Mariner. And then I'd go back as a teenager and look into that. Where Eagles Dare, it's about World War II, The Trooper. It's the War of 1812, I think. It's one of those wars. But you go back, and because Steve Harris was such a history buff, it caused me as a teenager to dig in and learn about some of these historical things that they would talk about in their songs. So I'm a big fan of Steve Harris. And where is all this going? He's going to write a book. At least he says he wants to. I'd love to write a book at some point, but it's just a question of time because there's so many other things that I do when I'm not on tour. And then he compares himself to Bruce Dickinson, the lead singer, who has written a book. Bruce's book was called What Does This Button Do? Came out in 2017. And Steve says, quote, I couldn't do like Bruce does. I mean, he just does 10 things at once. He told me that he was writing a book, like even in the dressing room before shows. I can't do that. I need to sort of set it out and do it really more methodical than that. So I know it would take me quite a bit of time to do, but yeah, I would like to do one. I mean, I probably could write a book just about the early days, really. So I think that'd be a great read. I'd love to read that. And I bet you Steve Harris is a really good writer. I just bet he is. Something says, his lyrics, his interest in history and language. He's a smart dude. I think it would be a great book. All right. We do have something in the email bag. By the way, I'd love to hear from you. Shoot me an email, classicguitarrock@mail.com. Here's what we've got today. And you know what? There's some nitpicking happening in this email, and I'm okay with that. Dear Classic Rock, of late, I've been listening to your daily updates and enjoying them for the most part. But it's distracting when you respond to random people messaging you. Like I did earlier with Marlon. Marlon, thank you for checking in. But that's not the real reason I'm sending this email, LOL. And there's a little heart. So maybe he's just picking up. I'm sure he does find it distracting when I respond to folks, but I like to respond to folks when they send me a message. I've heard you mention Ronnie James Dio in the context of Sabbath on several occasions, but I would love to hear your thoughts on him as a solo artist. Were you a big fan? I'm a huge fan. I'm just curious. By the way, distractions in your daily updates notwithstanding, I am enjoying them. Keep up the good work. That's from Kurt Abel. Kurt, thank you so much. And I like to get feedback like that. But more importantly, thank you for your email. Thank you for listening. And I would love to talk about Ronnie James Dio. He's got to be in my top 5. He's got to be in my top 5 of singers. I love Ronnie. And now that you mention it, and I think back about this, oh, by the way, my friend Will Hines checking in. There is a gag order on Will whenever he joins because he does know incriminating information about me. But I'm always happy to hear from Will. Thank you for chiming in. Kurt, sorry for the distraction. I love Dio, and I'm surprised I have not talked more in context of his solo stuff because I love his solo stuff. Let me say this. Holy Diver, Last in Line, great albums. Really, really good albums. After that, they kind of get a little, what's after that? Lock Up the Wolves, Sacred Heart. Was Sacred Heart the third and then Lock Up? I don't remember the order. After that, it's kind of hit or miss. But I love Holy Diver and Last in Line. I love his bands. He's had such great guitarists. And Marlon, you don't need to apologize for distracting me. It's my fault. I'm the one that decides to read them on the air. But again, to Kurt, our apologies for distracting. Dio had great bands. Vivian Campbell, Craig Goldie. I think it's Craig Goldie. Craig Goldie was great. Doug Aldrich, one of the later guitarists who played with Dio, is one of my favorite guitar players. And of course, you got, Jimmy Bain. Rudy Sarzo was even in Dio's band for a while. Vinny Appice. I mean, what's not to like? I love Dio's solo stuff. And you know what else I love? I love Dio's Rainbow stuff. Long Live Rock and Roll might be my favorite Rainbow album. You guys know I'm a huge Graham Bonnet fan, because Down to Earth, I think, is a great album too. And I love Joe Lynn Turner. I mean, I like all the Rainbow singers, but I mean, Dio, yeah, he was the template, right? He was a template. Here's an interesting observation. Ronnie Dio and Stevie Nicks. Ronnie Dio, Stevie Nicks. They're like mirrors of one another. They have the same stage moves. They wear the flowing robes. They do the same stage moves, the same sense of drama. Just interest. Watch Stevie Nicks, watch Dio. They went to the same choreography school. Check that out. But I love Ronnie James Dio. And this is a glaring oversight that we haven't spent more time talking about his solo stuff. And we'll do that. So Kurt, thank you so much for your email. Thanks to all of you for tuning in, for chiming in, for following us. And please, as I mentioned at the beginning, if you have other, pasty white 50-year-old friends, they don't have to be white. But if you have friends that hang out in their basement and listen to records, if you think they would like the classic guitar rock experience, please share. You can email me, classicguitarrock@mail.com. We'll do it all again tomorrow. Thank you so much. Live long and prosper. Bye-bye.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
Thanks for listening. You can email Jeremy at classicguitarrock@mail.com.
Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
Tune in each weekday for the Classic Guitar Rock Daily Update.